This is episode 10 of the Christian Travelers Network. Today we're going to be talking about how to pick a destination for your summer travels. Welcome to the Christian Travelers Network, where travel stories, community, and scripture combine. Hey Christian Travelers, I've been wrestling with what our next 5-week section should be, and I was gonna go one route and I have changed my mind. I think with summer being here, it's time to talk a little bit about some different tips and steps for traveling, and we're going to kick it off this week by how to pick a destination to travel to. But before we dive into that, once again, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to our podcast at christiantravelers.net. Last week we announced the winner of our giveaway, but this week I want to introduce you to an awesome workbook that I have put together that will be available on our website. It's going to give you some different tips about preparing for your travels and how to recognize God throughout your whole entire journey. Sometimes just journaling and processing, even in bullet point thoughts, helps us to remember that God is present throughout the whole journey and be able to look back and see what He's done. So that is a new resource on our website, so I encourage you to go check that out. But today we are talking about how to pick a travel destination. There are a number of different factors that go into this decision process, and one of the first things is who are you traveling with? If you are traveling with family, if you're traveling with colleagues, if you're traveling for a number of different reasons, those things have a big influence on what is being prioritized in your travels. I am a strong believer that kids should travel with you when you go because there's a lot of unique experiences that happen only in your travels. But I also believe if you're married, it's good to take some time just for the two of you to be refreshed together and to pour into one another spiritually, emotionally, etc. on a trip. That looks different for every single family. But with all that being said, how do you actually pick a destination? So one of the methods that typically works really well is to take a sheet of paper and write down all of the destinations that you or whoever's going with would like to go and who you will be traveling with. Writing that down visually just helps because sometimes you are all saying national parks and amusement parks and just all these different things. And then when you write down the list of people that's going with you, you can kind of begin to process, okay, these people, this option would work really well for, and these people, this option wouldn't work so well for. So writing out all the ideas, big and small, it could be like, I want to go to this specific town and I want to stay in this specific camping spot or at this specific hotel. Or it could be more generalized. While I'm traveling, I want to find a golf course or I want to find a museum. And it doesn't have to be so specific, but those are things that maybe are subcategories for you. Not a specific one is listed, but one of the activities you would like to do while there is listed. So kind of write those things all out and then take a moment and assess your budget. This is something we'll dive a little bit more into of how to budget for a trip next week, but sit down and look at your budget and how much have you set aside for a trip. This is something I strongly believe is an important thing. If you don't do Dave Ramsey courses for Financial Peace University, I strongly encourage you to. He talks a lot about the importance of envelopes and setting aside money and taking care of the priorities, getting those loans and debts paid off before you invest in the fun things, but at the same time, how to use what you do have to have some fun. So I strongly encourage you to be having envelopes and being a steward of what God has given you, to look at how you can budget and save for those bigger trips. When you set a budget, you're going to find that things are going to fall above and below the line. Like maybe you don't have enough this year to go international and go to Disney World in Paris, but you have enough money to go on a road trip 2 or 3 states away and do some smaller activities. That is the first kind of way of eliminating some of the things on your list that don't meet the budget, don't meet your reality line. So once you've eliminated, cross off some of those things from your destination list based on your budget. Now, your budget could look a couple different ways. For instance, if you have other friends that are going and they're also contributing to the trip, maybe you all have this agreed upon number. We're each going to pitch in $200, $300, and so now we have a bigger number. No, we can't all go international, but because we all have chipped in money, we can do a few other things. Kind of just depends who your company is in your travels. So once you've created that budget and you said this is the line, then go ahead and remove some things. I don't want to get too far into the budget, but make sure that you are recalling that, like, it takes money to get there. It takes money to do these activities. And then you're going to need to eat and maybe get some souvenirs, and just other expenses may pop up. So make sure that you have wiggle room, and it's not just, oh, we have $300 and it costs $250 to get into Disney, and we're going to get a flight to get there, and suddenly, wow, you have nowhere to stay and you can't buy a flight for $50 unless you're just very blessed. So now that you have narrowed down your destinations, and this is the next step that I strongly encourage you to do, and that is to pray. To pray that God reveals any destinations that you haven't thought about that should also be considered, and any people that maybe you should visit along this trip, even if they aren't like on your direct route, that you should also be considering, because sometimes we have these big plans for a specific trip and the timing just isn't always right, and God has other intentions for our travels. So praying about those things for him to reveal those for you. And so I'd take some time. It doesn't have to be that day. It could be a couple days from then, and come back and be like, okay, I think God put these people in my heart to at least consider. And maybe that means maybe they should come on the trip too. Who knows? And sometimes when God shows us those things to consider, it doesn't mean that this trip is necessarily going to be changed. Sometimes it means that you have to walk away from your original trip plans altogether because, wow, God, yeah, I need to go see these people, or I need to go do this thing. But either way, it's important to take time to consider that and reflect on what is God's intention with my travels and my money right now. So then the next step that I would go through with picking a destination, once you've reflected on all of those things, is if you have other people also traveling, to kind of talk through, hey, this is our budget line and this is what I think is feasible, and process with them, what does this mean, and do we have any strong feelings towards any of them. Otherwise, I'm going to give you some very unique ways to pick your travel experiences. Now, usually there's a logical one that will stand out and you'll be like, okay, yeah, this is what we're going to do. But sometimes there's a lot of good options. So one option that I've heard of is where you take a dartboard and you have each of the segments be a different option, and then you blindfold someone and they throw a dart. If the dartboard can spin so that they're like, oh, I saw that the Rhode Island road trip is right over there, I'm going to aim that direction. If the dartboard can spin so they can't guess where everything's at, and they throw the dart and then you just go with that one. Sometimes I've seen it where people, they don't plan in so much detail, and so they're like, okay, you know what, this is our budget, and we're gonna stretch it as far as we can, but we're going to have to be conscious of our money the whole trip. And so they'll flip a coin at every intersection that they come to, left or right, until they end up somewhere and they stay the night and they get housing and whatever, a hotel or something, an Airbnb. I've also seen it where when they're trying to pick destinations, that they take a map and they just throw a dart at it and they're like, okay, if that is an option within our budget, how do we get there and stay within our budget, and just explore wherever we chose. Or you can put all the names in a little hat and pull one out, and then whatever one you pull is the one you're going to. There's just different ways to have fun with picking your destination, but the important thing is to be praying about it before you throw the dart, or before you pull out the hat, or before you say, okay, here's where we're going. Just that God's involved, and that you're aware that He's there, and God, that we spend our money in a glorifying way, that we are rejuvenated on this trip, and that this destination, He may use us where we're going, and that this choice may be pleasing to you. Those are just some things to be thinking about when you're praying for a trip. So once you've chosen your destination, that is a super exciting step, and now you get to start planning some of the more important details, which might be like, where exactly are you staying and how exactly are you getting there, and this is all within your budget. So trying to find things that are feasible. I'm a very cheap person, and so if I'm traveling with companions, trying to find an Airbnb that is cheaper than a hotel, that still has good reviews. And now, because it's cheaper than a hotel and we're splitting it between 3 or 4 people, the cost dropped even more. Trying to find those things that are important to you. Maybe you need to write down a list of what your priorities are. We need a place with Wi-Fi. We need, when we're picking out a place to stay, it needs to have Wi-Fi, it needs to have good reviews, it needs to be safe, in a safe location, just those kinds of things. Do we need to have a pool? Does it need to have a breakfast? Just kind of picking what style of travel you're doing and then trying to do it on the most cost-effective budget, because maybe you want to splurge on hotels, but then you're going to do cheaper activities, or vice versa. So just being conscientious of those things and doing the research, taking the time to look, okay, well, the first thing that popped up was a flight from here to here that costs this much, but if I use a different site or if I use different airlines, it'll be a different price. So taking the time to research it all and write it down. That is the most important thing, because when you have that visualization of, here are all of our options and this is what the prices come to, then you can make some of those harder decisions because you're trying to stick to that budget line, and use your money wisely. But we're going to dive more into the budget side of things. But this week, I strongly encourage you to start researching some of those places. And next week, we'll dive into how to budget accordingly and keep things in check. I'd love to hear some of your travel destinations for the summer and just what is going on in your world. So please join our discussion on Facebook. Post away. Tell us all the fun, exciting things. Share how you've seen God in all of your travels so far this summer. And until next time, safe travels and God bless.